Bang! 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 She held her body weight pressed against the door, with everything she had. Her life now depended on it. But through a crack in the door, there came a flash of something shiny, and it all went black. "22-year-old Mild Weatherill, a weaver of checks, had been waiting till the cover of darkness to meet his lover, a young lady, a cook who lived and worked at the local parsonage for Reverend Mr. Plows. News of these late-night visits got back to the Reverend, and knowing his cook was only 16 years old, the vicar was fearful of any possible scandal from a long courtship, and refused permission for Weatherill to call on Sarah Bell, and even employed a private watchman to keep the boy away. Angered by the continuing clandestine meetings between the two, Reverend Plow dismissed the girl on the 1st of November 1867, and Sarah returned to live with her mother. When Miles next crept round the back of the house and knocked on the wooden door, he waited in excitement, wanting to see his Sarah. But it wasn't Sarah who answered the door. A man named Stansfield, who informed Miles, rather bluntly, that due to his visits, the Reverend had relieved Sarah of her position, and she'd been sent back to live with her mother. Miles flew into a rage, but was removed from the grounds. On a Monday night, the 2nd of March, 1868, after spending a few hours in the Black Swan in Todmorden, armed with an axe and 4 pistols, Weatherill went to the vicarage. Around 9:30 p.m, under the cover of darkness, a shadow stood at the end of the path leading to the parsonage, blinded by vengeful rage. There was a knock at the door, and then again. This time it was more forceful. Mr. Plow noticed the back door wasn't being answered, so he sighed to himself and made his way to the door, calling out as he went, "Hang on!" The door opened and the Reverend went white. "You!" The door flew open by a hand holding an axe, and a pistol was pushed into the Reverend's face. Plow saw the hand squeeze the trigger. He closed his eyes, but the gun didn't go off. He opened his eyes and turned to run. The attacker was furious with the gun's misfire, and threw the gun and swung the axe at the fleeing Mr. Plow, taking off his ear. The Reverend crashed into the table, sending pans crashing to the ground. Mr. Plow tried to push off the table and run to the door, but the attacker was on him, raining down blow after blow on his hands, his arms, his head. All the noise had roused the house, and on fear of a thief breaking in, the servants ran into the room. They couldn't believe the scene they were now confronted with. But after a moment's hesitation, the housemaid, Jane Smith, the new cook, Elizabeth Spink, and the nurse, Mary Hodgson, jumped on the attacker, grabbing at his clothes, his arms, and the nurse grabbed him by the hair, ripping back his head, causing him to fall to the ground. As he did so, everyone fled the room to hide in the house. Even the horribly wounded Mr. Plows escaped the room and ran straight out of the house. Reverend Plows managed to reach a nearby home of Mr. Greenwood, the church organist, where Mr. D.N. Cockcroft, the family surgeon, dressed his wounds. Everyone else still in the house was now hiding. It was silent. The only sound was the attacker's footsteps roaming the rooms. His pistol in one hand, he dragged his axe along the wall with the other. The housemaid was hiding in the dining room when she heard the footsteps stop. The doorknob turned slowly and then rattled. Realising the door was locked, the attacker slammed himself into the door over and over. To her horror, she saw the door break open She threw herself against it, pressing her back up against it, holding it closed. But again, he rammed it over and over until he got his arm through a gap in the door, bringing down the axe, partly severing her hand. In pain, she took pressure off the door, and he forced it open just enough to get his arm with the gun through, where he shot at her. And one of the bullets hit the housemaid, Jane Smith. She fell to the ground dead. The man pushed his way inside and looked down at the lady's body, smiling to himself as he blamed her for spreading rumours about him. He walked over her body into the next room, looking for another occupant to take his vengeance on. Mrs. Plow was laying in bed recovering from recently giving birth when she heard the slow footsteps climbing up the stairs, gradually getting closer, opening the doors to the different rooms as he got nearer. Then, her door opened slowly, and the attacker looked at Miss Plow. He raised his pistol and fired. But again, it misfired, so he walked over to the fireplace and he took hold of a poker and attacked the bed-stricken woman, raining down blows on her head. When suddenly the attacker, Miles Weatherill, felt hands gripping by the arm and the body, pulling him to the ground. He was dragged from the house by Mr. Stansfield and two of the male servants who held him tightly until the police came and dragged him away. Jane Smith, the housemaid, died of her injuries immediately. Reverend Mr. Anthony Plow died on the 12th of March 1868, and his 5-week-old daughter, Hilda Catherine, died on the same day. There are no details of the cause of the child's death, although newspapers from the time report that it was due to unavoidable removal from its mother at the time of her attack. Mrs. Plow would die 1 year later due to her injuries. Weatherill appeared before Todmorden magistrates on the Wednesday the 3rd of March 1868, and this was adjourned until Friday the 5th of March. On the 4th of March he appeared before the coroner's court, which was held at the Queen Hotel in Todmorden. And on the 13th of March 1868 Weatherill was tried at Manchester Assizes for the wilful murder of Jane Smith, and the jury immediately returned with the verdict of guilty. The judge, Mr. Justice Lush, passed the death sentence, and on Wednesday the 16th of March 1868 a coroner's inquest into the cause of death of Reverend Plows was held at the Black Swan in Todmorden. 7 witnesses were called, and the only item found on the attacker were love letters from Sarah Bell. It didn't take long for the jury to find Miles Weatherill guilty of wilful murder, and 23-year-old Miles Weatherill was hanged outside New Bailey Prison, Manchester, on Saturday, 4th of April 1868. Well, that'll about do it. There isn't really much of a second explanation to this story, like some of the others I tell. It's just really a sad story of vengeance. You send my love away and I'm going to destroy your family. I couldn't find any information of what happened to Sarah Bell after she moved back to her mother's home. This kind of attack shocked the nation and was in the newspapers for quite a while. Mrs. Plow, before she died, even received a letter from Queen Victoria, expressing her deep sorrow at what had happened. People ask where I find these stories, and this story I found as I was looking at churches for sale. I found this story as the church where this happened, Christ Church in Todmorden, was for sale. So looking into the church, I found there was a murder there, leading to this week's story. I hope you enjoyed this true story, and as always, I'd love to know what you think. But don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for the support, and take care.